The game that currently holds the title of the best Spider-Man VR game has finally made its way to the Oculus Quest 2, or the Meta Quest 2, or just the Quest 2. When I reviewed it the first time way back in November last year, it was an early access game with potential. Potential, albeit held back by some less than desirable performance. More than half a year later, Superfly has emerged from its early access stage and become a full release on both pcvr and the Quest App Lab, and I'm glad to say that it's a success. Superfly is an open-world action sandbox game taking place in a procedurally generated cityscape. As I deemed it previously, it's essentially a superhero simulator, as it gives you the powers of many different comic book characters. The game offers two modes, free play and story. Free play is the true sandbox mode, as it allows you to toy with the mechanics the game has on offer without restrictions. However, the story mode is where you'll likely spend the most of your time. Superfly has about as bare bones of a story as it gets, however, I don't think that fact stands in the way of it being fun. It's not like superhero media has a rhyme or reason to it all the time anyway. The game puts you in the shoes of an advanced robot built by mad scientist man Dr. Suffer. After being activated, you're shown the ropes in a tutorial. Turns out you have the ability to absorb superpowers you might just happen to find lying around. After his cat messes with some machinery, the whole story is set in motion. Suddenly, the force field keeping you inside this laboratory is deactivated, and after Dr. Suffer departs, you destroy some equipment and make your way out into the city.
Do not fly up that shaft! Do not leave this lab!
Get f***ed. Suffer isn't going to let you get away with that too easily, though. In order to hunt you down and deactivate you, he sends out an army of drones your way. These come in the form of a small drone, a big drone, an exploding drone, and a drone with legs. After dispatching them, you'll begin to pick up these gears and unlock more and more power sets, powers that will come in handy against the mighty adversaries you'll be pitted against in boss battles. There are 3 beacons laid out across the city, and those beacons activate encounters with giant mechanical bosses. One of these is a giant spider, the boss I personally found to be the coolest. It's a shame that it's pretty squishy. I was able to destroy it in less than a minute of it emerging from around the corner of a building. Nevertheless, true to its form, this spider boss will employ webs to apprehend you, and will otherwise just throw itself at you if that doesn't work. Mechanically, this boss is a bit dull, as it essentially comes down to mustering enough shit to throw at it all at once to kill it as soon as possible. Perhaps having it shield itself with webs or send out some kind of venom blast could add some extra depth. The next boss I fought was the giant worm boss, the one from the old version of the game. This writhing little bastard was as spry as ever as it twisted its way in between buildings, all the while releasing drones to do the dirty work for it. Despite being a worm, this one wasn't as squishy as its arachnid counterpart. I did notice, however, that it never really attacked me. It would just kind of float around and ignore me while it released minions that were about as formidable as houseflies. I really wish I could have seen it be more aggressive towards me. Something that's always been so scary about giant worm bosses, especially the Destroyer in Terraria, is that it attacks you head on. Imagine this thing heading straight towards you, and unless you blast it to hell, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. But despite the shortcomings, I like how this boss really encourages you to move around the city. It moves quickly, both horizontally and vertically, as opposed to the spider, which, unless you're on the ground, you can mostly outpace. The final boss I fought was easily the most intense challenge yet. No more mechanical insects, this thing is just a big f***-off gun that will end you if you don't end it. Something unique to this boss fight is the presence of a mechanic. It's simple, but it's there. As you can see, the turret has a force field surrounding it that you must deactivate. Within a short radius of the boss, you'll be able to find generators powering it that can be destroyed, dropping the force field. After a damage phase, the shield will be reactivated, and so on and so forth. But in the in-between phase is where it gets really gnarly. You're likely to hear the turret exclaim this:
"Overcompensation protocol commencing!"
And I honestly cannot think of a better name for what follows that. After the utterance, a gigantic volley of EMP missiles will be en route to your location, and if even a couple of them hit you, say goodbye to your powers, at least for a couple seconds. While I would say it's a little on the unfair side, especially with how the EMP missiles often deactivate all my favourite powers, I appreciate the challenge after basically coughing on my previous enemies and them combusting. After this third and final boss fight, I was surprised to find that was the end of Superfly's main story content. Guess I'll never get to find out what happens to Dr. Suffer, and more importantly, meet his cat. Despite the story content being a bit lackluster, the power Superfly puts into your hands is unprecedented, so let's get into it.
sounds like the Among Us sound.
As you can probably already assume, the main mechanic of Superfly is the superpower system. The game gives you 8 different power sets to choose from, ranging from game-breakingly powerful to bird wings. The power sets usually offer a means of traversal and some sort of utility, whether that be defensive or offensive. Those gears you've been collecting this whole time are also a currency used to purchase side grades. The superpowers are incredibly diverse, so let's jump in. Power set 1 is what I've come to call Electro Powers, although they don't seem to have a very pinpointable inspiration. The default traversal method is a unique flight mode that has you hold down the grip button and throw out your hands in a direction to which you're flung to. I actually quite enjoy this movement mode. It's really fast and super intuitive to control, but if it's not your thing, you can switch it out for a more Superman-like flight system as well. Your offense is either a steady stream of electricity or a chargeable railgun. Out of the two, I prefer the railgun, since it's a lot more accurate and long range. Power set 2 is a set of Dr. Octopus arms. To traverse the city, you can walk along surfaces with the arms, like in the movies. 2 additional arms can also be activated, which, why wouldn't you? By default, the hands of the arms can be spun, turning them into deadly fists, or you can switch to swords being drawn from them. The way controlling 4 arms with 2 hands has been accomplished is absolutely phenomenal. It feels incredibly natural. Despite not being overly flashy, this power set is one of my favourites. Power set 3 gives you a pair of giant wings you can flap around with. If you're incredibly conscious of how you look playing VR, then you can also switch to an auto flap setting. I tend to use this just because it's a lot more practical. But if that still doesn't suit you, a pair of rechargeable rocket boots can also be enabled. To eliminate enemies, you can fling feathers out from your body in a charged burst. Unfortunately, I don't find this power set to be very compelling. The wings feel really janky, especially with how they often clip into things and muck your whole day up. The feathers aren't very effective in combat either. Power set 4 is something I've never seen done in VR before. Frozone Powers. The triggers are used to pave a path of ice that pushes you forward, or earth if you switch it to that. You can also change the way momentum behaves on the ice to being faster near buildings. On the offense, an icicle blast can be charged up. I found that these icicles were most effective when you charge them all the way, which can be kind of detrimental if you're surrounded. Perhaps an alternate ability where you can release a barrage of icicles in a sphere around you could best fix this. Otherwise, this power set is incredibly unique. Power set 5 is the big one, Spider-Man powers. You can switch between pendulum and grapple-based swinging, both being incredibly fast-feeling. I obviously prefer the pendulum mode, and if you don't know why, then please consult my life's work. Additionally, you have 2 different kinds of web shots, web tasers and web bombs. Both of these are really fun to use, but the tasers are more effective in combat. Power set 6 is the other big one, Iron Man powers. This is easily the best VR Iron Man experience I've ever had, partly because I haven't played any other Iron Man VR experiences, and partly because this game allows you to straight up nuke stuff with an alternate attack. If you don't feel like causing a nuclear winter though, you can instead use these missiles. To move around, classic Iron Man thrusters can be employed, or this explosion movement thing I can never quite get the hang of. Power set 7 gives you the power of being fired from a blockbuster movie. Wait, hold on, that's not right. Right, yeah, I mean, the power of being the fastest man alive, yeah. Hold the triggers to flash across the city at the speed of force. Alright, that was pretty bad. I'll stop the stupid flash puns now. Okay, I'm sorry. At the speed you're going, your body is the weapon. Running into things will just make them shatter. The grip buttons also allow you to run in slow motion. The alternate abilities for this power set are a bit redundant though. The first one makes the world slow down if you move fast enough, but I can never really get this to work. Plus, you can just slow down the world anyway. The second one makes you really bouncy in slow motion, which I just found to be a pain. Overall, this power set isn't very practical for combat, since running into things takes a lot of precision, but it's great for domestic terrorism. Despite my whinging, the flash powers are really fun. And finally, power set 8 is confusing? It's centered around shooting out black holes. They can be released from your gloves, and depending on what you choose, will pull objects towards them or push them away. You can also choose to shoot out a few or a dozen. If you elect to, you can also use this to fly around, but I found this really clunky. And that's all of them. Don't forget, you can mix and match these powers in so many different ways. I love combining the Flash's slow motion with Iron Man's nukes, or Spider-Man's web bombs with Electro's hoverflight, and just using the Ock Arms by themselves. Like, holy crap, it is that good. Well done, Locomotion, like, holy fuck. One thing, make sure you go into the settings and play around a little bit. I found that even though they're all disabled or turned down by default, a lot of the settings from the PC version run just fine on Quest 2, from my experience at least. Having fragments turned on makes blowing up trucks in slow motion way more satisfying. If you're not into that either, just having a fly, swing, walk, or run around can be great fun too. Let me also add that the way you switch between these powers is pretty seamless. Before the full release, you switch powers with this messed up wheel that used the face buttons and the joystick. It was just bad. Super clunky, unintuitive, took me right out. Now it's a simple hold a button down and move your hand system, which is 100 times better. But mirror them, please. This doesn't feel right. There's also a couple customization settings to play around with, altering the strength of gravity and whatnot. The city can also be changed to being set in winter or Australia. Now, before we get into my final assessment, let's just quickly talk about some of the fundamental things Superfly does right. Superfly's art style is extremely functional, as it both looks nice and is well optimized for platforms like the Quest. Speaking of optimization, I want to extend a massive well done to Locomotion for their work on bettering the game's performance. While it's not perfect, it's a huge improvement over previous versions of the game. I remember back when I reviewed Superfly in the Spider-Man VR Hunt Part 2, one of the main things I didn't like was how the game ran. Using the Ock Arms would completely tank my frames. Now the only thing that comes close to that is when I nuke things, which I can't really blame the devs for not optimizing. That being said, please don't fix this Locomotion, it's so much fun. I actually quite like the music that plays as you superhero about in Superfly. My favourite ones were the tracks that sounded more fun and zany, like this one. And that's because I think they fit with the game's overall tone. Superfly approaches its subject matter with a similar cadence to the MCU, that this is all ridiculous and we should just have fun with it. This gives the game freedom to have goofy enemies and robots that have funny personalities. Alrighty, it's time to give Superfly a final score. When it comes down to it, I think Superfly offers a simulation of superhero powers unrivaled by any other game I've played. It displays a wide range of powers that can be used both by themselves and in combination, and while not all of them are amazing, the ones that are certainly make up for it. Among the sprawling skyscrapers of Superfly's city, story content is a bit sparse, with only 3 somewhat easy boss missions. With some tweaks and additional features, these missions could become just that bit more of a challenge. But even if that can't be done, the solid and satisfying superpowers will keep me coming back to the game, even if just to blow up some cars for 20 minutes.